I'm Marty Cohn, and welcome to episode 9 of PR Benefits, a show that explores the role of public relations in the COVID-19 era. I've been a PR practitioner for over 45 years, helping a wide array of organizations successfully communicate their messages to their targeted audiences. I mistakenly thought that 9/11 would be the watershed event in my lifetime. Communicating in the aftermath of that tragic event was challenging. Then came the global economic downturn in 2008 with more lessons in crisis communications. However, 12 years later, we have the coronavirus pandemic, and new challenges in uncharted waters have emerged. My guest today is Brian Chandler, president of Commonwealth PR in Richmond, Virginia. All right, Brian, this is where you have to listen to all this. Brian is the founder of Commonwealth PR and brings more than 20 years of experience to his clients. He is skilled at providing strategic communications and marketing counsel to clients ranging from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies. His professional expertise includes research, planning and implementation, and evaluation with a specific focus on ROI, return on investment, of his company's efforts on behalf of his clients. Brian is a former reporter for several newspapers in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. He knows what makes reporters tick and how to get their attention when pitching clients. He was nicknamed the Bulldog for his ability to persuade reporters to cover his clients. The 2019 Readers Poll by Virginia Lawyers Weekly magazine voted Commonwealth PR first place in the public relations firm category. Welcome, Brian, or should I say, Bulldog.
Bulldog. Marty, it's great to be here with you today. Yes, Bulldog is a nickname that I've had for probably almost all 20 years. Most people call me Brian, but some people here internally, and then definitely at my old firm from Charlotte, North Carolina, know me and still call me as the Bulldog.
Okay, Bulldog. I like the name. That's going to stick as far as I'm concerned. All right, so you started out. You were doing journalism. You were a journalist. How did you get started in public relations?
Yeah, it was interesting because in North Carolina, I wrote for an afternoon paper. So which I don't think any really exist anymore. This was back in the late 90s, and we came in really early in the morning. We had a 8 or 9 o'clock a.m. deadline, and then the paper came out in the afternoon. Really liked that schedule. I was a general assignment reporter, covered a lot of different things, but I decided to make the move to South Carolina to a larger daily newspaper, of course, nightly deadlines, and just the grind of the late nights and the daily deadlines caught up to me. And of course, as many PR practitioners have done, they've transitioned from journalist side over to public relations, just because media relations is certainly a key part of what we do in public relations as a whole, as a practitioner, and just a natural fit. So at the time, my fiance was in Charlotte, North Carolina, right. And I started to apply to a couple of firms and landed with a small firm with about a dozen or so folks there, and ended up staying for about 10 years. But wow. I definitely believe that my background in journalism helped me get that job.
That's great. That's great. Well, I've been a PR flack from the beginning, so it's great. I like to hear people who join our ranks. So Brian, what I like to do is really kind of break things down a little bit in terms of when we look at COVID-19. So the first part of this is pre-COVID-19. What were some of the highlights of your career pre-COVID-19?
Sure. Well, like I said, I joined the firm in Charlotte. So this was back in 1999, I guess, maybe 2000.
Okay.
And I would consider this a highlight where my very first job responsibility was to develop a pitch for an Associated Press reporter about one of our clients. I mean, throw me to the wolves, why don't they?
Right.
And land this story with the local AP. The client was Verizon Wireless, and they had a very neat product where they would drive around and basically test their own cell signal along with all their competitors
Right.
in a large blue station wagon with antennas all over the top. And in the very back, they had literally the cell phones, the old school cell phones, all connected to a laptop that was in the front seat. And so we nicknamed this vehicle the Road Warrior.
The Road Warrior. Okay.
And that nickname and the strategy of naming this vehicle and taking this concept to the Associated Press and say, hey, here's one company, how they're thinking outside of the box and testing their signal along with their competitors. The AP reporter loved it, ate it up, and I landed a story for my very first pitch with the firm and with an Associated Press reporter, and it ended up running all over the country.
Great story.
But sometimes I think about that and I'm like, if I hadn't had landed that pitch, what would that have meant for my career? It was a huge boost. And now being a firm owner and having younger colleagues join our team, some who sometimes have never pitched the media before, I often think about that situation and how important it is that they're successful the first time they do some type of media relations campaign. But that's really where the Bulldog name came from, was being able to land that pitch with an Associated Press reporter off the bat. But thinking about other things related to the pre-COVID-19, I started my firm here in 2008 like you said, when the economy took a downturn. And we made the move to Virginia. I joined a former client that we had when I was in Charlotte and became director of public relations for the company. And it was a large nonprofit. And it was interesting because that was the first time I was in-house versus an agency after being in an agency setting for 10 years. And I sort of really felt like the agency life was my calling.
Right.
After 12 to 18 months with the organization, started to think about how can I make this move back into the agency setting. And of course, in 08 and 09, no one was hiring. A good friend of mine said, why don't you just start to moonlight, see if you can pick up a few clients here and there on the side and just see where that goes. What I found was that a lot of companies had laid off their full-time marketing and PR staff.
Right.
And I was able to come in with as a PR practitioner with my APR, my accreditation in public relations, and 10 years of experience, a real strategic focus, no overhead because I was working from home, and bring a lot of value and strategic value to these organizations who really saw after a year of not having their team like it was that they needed somebody on board. One thing led to another, and a financial consulting firm, a pretty large one, came and asked if I would do a 6-month contract. And the retainer was large enough that it was a now or never type of situation.
Right.
So I pulled the trigger and officially started Commonwealth Public Relations. And so that was back in 2009. But it's interesting how I think in this COVID realm, which we'll talk about some in a minute, just how staff are being reduced and budgets are being cut in some certain ways, and how that could potentially present opportunities to not just individuals like me, but PR practitioners all over the country who might be wanting to be entrepreneurial and potentially try to start their own firm, or maybe they were laid off from a company and they're looking for what their next step might be. So really the firm, just being able to start the firm then was kind of one of the highlights, I think, during pre-COVID. And then one last thing I think I'll say is that the marine and boating industry has always been a passion of mine. I love to boat. I love to saltwater fly fish. And about 5 years in, after I started my firm, I started to think about how can I make a headway in that industry to start to nail down some clients. Very tough to break into that industry. There's only a few key players in terms of PR firms. They're all very well known, but the way that I got started was interesting. With my Twitter account, I changed the profile or the bio on my Twitter account to PR practitioner, handling public relations for all sorts of companies, but also passionate about the marine and boating industry.
Oh.
And so I started literally overnight. I started following all these marine and boating and fishing companies on Twitter, which before that I really had never followed. It was mostly PR and news outlets and those kind of things. So, and this was actually a recommendation from our social media manager in-house. As she said, just change up your profile and then start following everybody in the industry.
Right.
So connected with the National Marine Manufacturers Association. And then after 6 months or so, I got a call from a person in their Washington office, Washington, D.C., and they said, hey, we're going to be sending out an RFP for one of our sister organizations, the Personal Watercraft Industry Association.
Right.
And we want you to apply. And I said, well, how did you pick me? I'm here in Richmond in a small firm. And she said, well, you've been engaging with us on Twitter for the last 6 months. And one thing led to another, and we got the work, got the project. And so that was all it took. And we've since worked with probably about a dozen companies in the marine industry, have a couple full-time retainers that we work with, and worked with some very well-known and well-known brands. So being able to have my book of business of a diverse, financial services, nonprofits, but also work in the marine industry has been very exciting and fulfilling.
Brian, I love that story. I mean, you're not just a bulldog about media pitches. You're a bulldog about getting business. I think that is fantastic. I mean, that was really entrepreneurial. I love it. All right, so let's go to COVID. What we have right now is, we've got this pandemic going on. What are you doing for your clients during COVID?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We have really approached all of our clients with crisis communication scenarios. And it's interesting you mentioned in my bio how the Virginia Lawyers Weekly nominated us in their readers poll best PR firm. That actually came from our crisis work with law firms, not handling their crisis situation, but their client's crisis situation. And so we've always done a lot of crisis communications work. And so it was natural for us to say to our clients, hey, we need to consider messaging. Who are your target audiences during this time? Who do you need to be talking to? What does that message need to look like? And of course, with most crisis situations, what you want to do is get business back to normal as quickly as possible.
Sure.
But COVID threw in the conundrum of it just is not going to happen. And so our approach was, what can we, who can we communicate with, how, but then how do we try to help them sustain their business through this time? And so the approach with that became innovation. One of our clients is a small boutique retailer here, and we said, let's connect you with a real estate virtual tour guide, have them come in and do a virtual tour of your store so that customers who are used to the small and really in-person and personal touch that a boutique store offers get that same feeling during a time when they can't come in. Also use Facebook Live and FaceTime to really connect and show your customers what's happening with the store and communicate with them about deliveries or curbside pickup.
Sure.
One of our healthcare companies thought up this idea of doing a virtual science fair for kids who school was out. Their science fair project was no longer a thing. And here in Virginia, Miss America is from Virginia. And so we contacted her and said, and she's a scientist,
Right.
contacted her and asked her if she would be one of our judges. And she said she would love to be involved, thought that this was a really fantastic idea. And so we're trying to come up with ideas for our clients that get them out into the media, into social media, that build their brand and sustain their brand, but at the same time, allow them to have a voice that when all this starts to come back somewhat to normal, they're still very, very relevant. I will say that some of our clients, they just can't. Restaurants, of course, there's only so much they can do. For the initial month and a half, they were completely shut down.
Sure.
So a lot of them, fortunately, we don't have a lot of restaurant clients, but we talked a lot about how can we potentially help clients and help potential clients. So that's where we came up with the vlog idea, the PR and communications vlog. And I want to jump into that for a second. So the day that, I think this was around March 15th, March 16th, the day that everything really pretty much shut down. That Friday we worked from home, and I got our team together on Microsoft Teams, and I said, hey, we are going to need to figure out, not just for our clients, but for ourselves, how are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to stay out in front of potential clients, the public during this time, and really use it as an opportunity to help people in the community who are hurting. And there was somebody on our team mentioned the Cisco study that said that 82% of people in 2020 are going to get their content from video.
Right.
And as we started talking about it, we decided there's going to be just tons of written information on COVID and how people are handling the situation. But what there is probably not going to be is a lot of video. And especially on the public relations, branding, marketing side, there's not going to be a lot of video of people talking about trends and new ideas and what's being done that's innovative. We actually did some research, and there's only a very few PR vlogs, video blogs. And we said, this looks like a good opportunity for us. Now, we're not a video production firm by any means. So it was challenging to some extent to figure out, okay, we needed to get tripods, something that would hold our phone. We learned quickly that we needed a microphone, a lapel mic that we could hook up. So we worked through some of those issues, but just talked about different topics, what we were seeing. And a couple of the topics that really have played well is offering up free advice. So our director of client services did a post and said, if you need help, there's a link in the comments section. So all of our vlogs are hosted on YouTube,
Right.
But we share them across multiple social media channels. But go to our Calendarly link and book a time to just talk about what you're dealing with in your situation. And it was very interesting how many people just felt hopeless,
Right.
that felt like they needed somebody to talk to about what could potentially be the future and how can I navigate the waters that we're in right now. When Virginia reopened, our director of client services did a vlog then about considering communication strategies when you're reopening your business or reopening. And that one had the most views of them all. Another one that has had a lot of views was a client of ours called Cupron, creates copper infused fabrics for medical use, so medical textiles. And after COVID happened, one of their clients here in Virginia actually took some of those bed linens that were copper infused and started to create masks. Very innovative thinking. And so they thought this is a perfect opportunity. We helped them announce last month that a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, ordered 25,000 of their copper infused masks. And so I did a video about just the innovation of using these and the protection. And I got all kinds of inquiries on how do I get the mask? How do I contact the company? But more so, everybody just thought, I mean, it was like, we know that copper is an antimicrobial. Why hasn't somebody thought of this sooner?
Sure.
It was really neat to sort of see that feedback from different individuals in the community who saw what we were doing and really thought, you know, they're featuring clients that are doing things that are innovative, and that in turn sparks creation of innovative ideas on their own. So for us, COVID has been a time when we're focusing on crisis communications, mostly for clients, but over time we've moved into here's how you can stay out front and relevant and continue to build your brand and build awareness until things start to get back to somewhat of a norm.
Again, I am so impressed with how you're thinking. It really, I am glad you made the switch to become a PR guy, because that's what PR people do. Is we see a challenge and we come up with the solution to the challenge. That's what you're doing. All right, so you've done these vlogs, which is great. One of the topics, let's you know, we are going to come out of this, and we are going to begin what I have to use air quotes when I do this, you know, a new normal, right? Mm-hmm. This is going to, what do you think is going to be the role of public relations when we begin this new normal?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the key roles is to help companies rethink their business plan, especially nonprofits, and even for-profits, rethink their marketing communications plans for the next 6 months. I mean, it's not going to be long before we're into July.
Right.
So then we're looking at the rest of 2020, but then into 2021. We have seen such a shift in measurement and outcomes that clients predicted and thought that they were going to see at the beginning of the year, and even last year when we were planning, that now they're having to think about what are our new benchmarks? What do they need to be for the end of the second quarter? What do they need to be for the end of the third quarter, and so on? And so once we help them in setting that number, how are we going to help them reach that? And so for the nonprofits, I think we're at a time when I think 40 million people are unemployed.
Right.
And how do you ask somebody for money when they potentially don't have a job? There's a empathy aspect to it, a lot of sensitivity. But then again, nonprofits have a lot of passionate supporters, and we have to help them figure out how do they stay in front of their audience and their supporters in a way where there's so much noise over here about COVID and businesses and everything else going on, so that they can continue to do their mission and accomplish their mission each and every day. So what we are really doing is trying to think about what do the next 6 months look like, and what does 2021 potentially look like. Some of our clients have just it's been slow and steady all the way through, no changes, but others are definitely going to have to make some changes. And so I think one last piece is just in terms of your communications channels. You've got, of course, the digital realm of email marketing, social media, blogs, and others. So it's really trying to figure out, people are at home now, people are using their mobile devices. What is the most effective way to communicate with them and to communicate your messaging? It's not as easy as we're going to go and try to get a story about our client and hope that they're going to see it, because I mean, some newspapers aren't even publishing anymore. Right. They've furloughed a lot of their staff. So it's really thinking creatively about what is the best channel for communications to stay in front of them. So a couple different things there. I hope I wasn't too far, too all over the place. But
and you also touched on you know, I wanted to tie into your expertise as a former journalist too. I mean, that landscape has changed. I think we are not going to go back to you know, you know, you're bulldogging. I'm going to turn it into a verb now, I guess. You know, in terms of story, I think a lot of folks are now realizing they're turning to their own communication channels. You know, your vlog is a great example of that. But it's figuring out, okay, where is your target audience going to be able to hear your message, and for you to get that feedback loop back. So I think that, and that's what PR folks they're good at, and that's what I think they're going to continue to do. So
yeah, I'll just add one thing I think that you made me think of is a lot of times most of the time when we start with a new client, we do a discovery phase or research.
Right.
And then sometimes halfway through or once a year, we'll do one. Well, with one of our Marine clients, they sent out a survey today, and it was somewhat COVID focused, but it was also on just how's your life changed and what do you anticipate over the next 6 to 12 months and how those changes will affect your day-to-day activities. And that's just incredibly smart right now, because companies need to know what their audience is thinking. And it doesn't have to be a very long survey, but reach out and ask them questions. Where are they getting their information from? How are they communicating?
Exactly.
And that can help you really adjust your PR strategy to where you can see some results.
Couldn't agree with you more. All right. Brian Chandler, president of Commonwealth PR in Richmond, Virginia. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's been great. Thanks so much for having us.
My pleasure. I want to send a shout out to Richard Mellinson at BCTV for helping to edit the show. Rachel Cohn, my art professor daughter from Ball State, who is helping me with some technical assistance, and also from Twin Musicom for letting me use their music, Hack the Jazz, which you're hearing on both ends of the show. I'm Marty Cohn in Vermont. Stay healthy.